Harley Race passed away 2 days ago, and I'm here to talk about his career. He was one of the all-time greats. He has had a career based in wrestling throughout some of the biggest promotions during his time. He wrestled in the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, the AWA, the American Wrestling Association, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, first WWF, then WWF, now it's WWE, obviously. And he also worked in World Championship Wrestling, WCW. So he was a 9-time world champion. He was one of the biggest stars, really, in his time in the 70s. And he had the kind of body that a wrestler had. During the 80s, when the whole steroid stuff happened, he had all the big, giant bodybuilders. But the 70s wrestlers, what you think of is Harley Race, really. It's a big guy, a big, bulky guy, big arms, but, he has a big big gut, big stomach. But, he's big and bulky. He looks like a football player almost. He was really big. And he got his start in 1960. Now, one thing is that happened to him that's terrible in 1960 was he was married that same year. He was in a car accident with the wife he had married just 5 weeks prior to that. 5 weeks later, she dies in a car accident. He nearly lost his leg. And then he came back to wrestling, but he obviously had a horrible tragedy in his life, losing your wife right away. He gets into the AWA in 1965. He was nicknamed the Handsome Harley Race, and he was part of a heel. He was a heel at first. He gets there, and he starts to become one of their top stars in the AWA. He becomes one of the biggest stars. He became their champion, and he was one of the guys you really looked at. Once he was there from 1965 to 1986. And in the AWA, he also wrestled in the NWA. He was there from 1970 to 1984. And he would jump from territory to territory. And the NWA also had a big audience. Both of them were really popular. Of course, the National Wrestling Alliance has several different territories. They were all different parts in Florida and Texas, some of the biggest states. They all had their own wrestling, the NWA, and he would work in both of them. And he soon became one of the most popular wrestlers in his time. He had a great feud with a young Ric Flair, and when his feud with Ric Flair, it really happened in which he passed the torch to Ric Flair. And Ric Flair would go on to credit Harley Race for igniting his career. And once he left the NWA, he had a 26-year career after that. From 26 years started, he leaves the AWA. He had also wrestled in the NWA, so he's very old now. And at that point, he is in his 40s, and he goes to WWF. And I would really compare Harley Race's run in the WWF to Dusty Rhodes's. They were both old, they were out of shape, they were done, and it just didn't really work. He gets there, and he's managed by Bobby Heenan, and he becomes the King Harley Race. Things just didn't go very well. He had the WrestleMania match with the Junkyard Dog at WrestleMania 3. Harley Race won the match. He pinned him, and of course the Junkyard had to kiss his feet, but then the Junkyard decked him after the match, and he stayed there for a while. He left in 1989, so it was really just a 3-year stint there. And he went back to the AWA in 1990, and there he was more of just a guest. He never actually really signed a contract. He was just a guest there for a while. He went to the Worldwide Wrestling Council in Puerto Rico in 1989. In that period after he left the company, he also spent some time there. He would wrestle sporadically. Then finally he goes back to WCW, and WCW was the NWA, and of course Jim Crockett Promotions. Eventually was a part of it. Now it's its own promotion. He comes back on the Great American Bash on July 7th, 1990. He defeats Tommy Rich, and there he becomes a bigger name. He becomes older guy. He has a better run there in WCW in his second run. The WWF run was horrible, but it seemed like he was more motivated in WCW. He ended up doing well in his second time there, and he would even hold the title for a while. And once he left WCW, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame actually in '94. And one of the reasons he leaves again was he has another car accident in '95, and it basically puts him out of the wrestling business. So obviously he has two terrible car accidents, really, really awful for him. And he had 3 marriages. His second wife, he married Candice Marie, ended in divorce, and then his third wife was Evan. Her name was Yvonne, and she divorced him in the 90s after 30 years of marriage. So he had kids too, and he also, I think he had, a fourth wife named Beverly. Oh, sorry, a second wife. I made a mistake. Fourth wife, Beverly, and he was with her until her death in 2009. So he's obviously had very, so he lost some close people in his life. His wives, he's lost lost 2 of them really that he was married to. And he goes back in the WWE in the mid-2000s. He makes sporadic appearances. We saw him a few times. He did some stuff in TNA too. One thing I really remembered him, one of my favorite parts, was when he basically congratulated Ric Flair, and after Ric Flair retired after WrestleMania 24, we saw him appear on Raw, which was a big surprise, and he looked good actually for his age, but that was really cool seeing him, and he ran to the ring. That was a really great moment there. Another great achievement of Harley Race is he's been inducted into multiple Hall of Fames. He's one of the 6 men who's been inducted into each of the WWE Hall of Fame, the NWA Hall of Fame, the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, and the Wrestling Observer and Newsletter Hall of Fame. So those are all pretty much the big 4 Hall of Fames to get into wrestling. When you think about it, right now, the NWA Hall of Fame isn't as big of a deal, but he was inducted. He went into the WWE Hall of Fame. And he went to the WWE Hall of Fame in 2004. That was when they started to do the Hall of Fame as a ceremony again after they brought it back after it was pretty much gone for a while. There, he actually returned to television for a while, and he feuded with Randy Orton after that when Orton was doing the Legend Killer stuff. And as he got older, we saw less of him. He was 76 years old at the time of his death. And his death, he was very sick. We had it had been known that he had lung cancer since March. And Ric Flair, I don't know if he should have done this, but he is the one who announced that Harley Race had terminal lung cancer. And it had then been confirmed a day later. And eventually, we heard on August 1st that Harley Race passed away 2 days ago. Dustin Rhodes is one of the first that announced it, and he was very close to Harley Race. He was 76 years old, died of lung cancer, a legend in the wrestling business. He will be remembered and he will be missed. One of the all-time greats that the business has had, an icon, a Hall of Famer, and rest in peace to Harley Race.